And it's 2:30, so welcome to Tea Tuesday. Very nice to be back. It's that time of the month again. It comes around so quickly. Good afternoon to everybody. Welcome to the 18th in our series of Tea Tuesday events and the 2nd of 2022. My name's Hilary Woodhead. I'm NAPA's Executive Director, and I am delighted to host these live events, which enable me to drink tea. I've got my enormous cup of tea, as always, and chat with subject specialists and friends of NAPA. This is a free event, as always. If you would like to make a small donation, perhaps the price of a cup of tea or coffee, we would be most grateful, and you can do that by text or on our donate page, and my colleague will pop details of how to do that in the chat. So today, back by popular demand, I have to say, is the wonderful Mike Phillips. So pleased to have Mike with us. He's a returner, a Tea Tuesday returner. He is also NAPA's advisor for LGBT Inclusion and a NAPA associate trainer, but he does many, many other things too. He's a freelance consultant, passionate about releasing potential through learning and development and improving the lives of those receiving care. And I've seen him firsthand do just that. He's been involved in LGBT and HIV activism for 30+ years. Oh, you're giving your age away there, Mike.
I know.
Including delivering the first ever LGBT awareness training for South Wales Police. And he was an independent evaluator on Age UK's LGBT project, Opening Doors. He's also been involved with the Rainbow Cafe, and he has worked extensively with people with dementia and their carers. Mike is a former actor, and so if you didn't know that about him, you have to know that about Mike. I think it's absolutely runs through him like Blackpool Rock. He loves the theatre, he loves the arts, and he loves NAPA. And I think his support for NAPA over the last couple of years, since he's joined us as an advisor and associate, has been absolutely outstanding. And we're really grateful for his input and his advice. When he's doing all of those millions of things, he's at home in East London with his 2 gorgeous Cocker Spaniels, who apparently are at the window at the moment. We're hoping they won't burst into song. They might give us a little song at some point. But yes, he loves his dogs, does Mike. So today we're discussing a topic of mutual interest, which is LGBT History Month, and why LGBT specific activities and LGBT friendly activities are important for care homes. And we're going to spend kind of the next half an hour or so drinking tea and chatting. And we have a live audience. Brilliant to see lots of people have just arrived. So hopefully we'll get some questions and comments in the chat as well. I've also liaised with our activity support service manager, Natalie, and she's got has shared some questions from the helpline around LGBT History Month as well. So we've got plenty to go on, Mike. So welcome. Thank you for coming back.
Thank you for inviting me back.
It's a good sign when people come back.
I don't often get invited back anywhere.
I'm sure that's not true. It's lovely to have you back.
I've been blushing. I don't often blush, but I've blushed with that intro you gave me. Thank you very much.
Oh, incredible. I mean, it's so well deserved, and not a word of a lie, any of it, I promise. So tell us a little bit about yourself and why the month of February is so important in terms of LGBT history.
Right. Well, the bit I had prepared for that you've already said. So you've already said quite a bit about me, but I suppose why is it important to me? I suppose it's important on many different levels, really. And I suppose I would say, first of all, I've always, LGBT plus things aside, I've always been fascinated by history and life history. And I've therefore brought a little something along. I don't know if you can see this. That's actually me as a little boy, which proves that I did once have hair.
I love the dicky bow. Is that a dicky bow you're wearing?
No, I didn't. I went everywhere with a dicky bow. And inside, without them all falling out, is lots of the box was given to me by a friend from the charity I set up, and it says Precious Things on the front. I use it to store precious things. And so with being an associate with Meaningful Care Matters, when we do our session around life history, we share some of our own life history as trainers. So this is a little treasure trove for me. So I'm going to just talk about the importance of history and life experience and life history, because there's two things that I'm really going to share. One is this very battered, well, it's chewed actually. My dog, my young older dog, when she was a puppy, decided she'd chew this, but this was my great-grandfather's pipe. Yes. And he used to puff on this pipe, and he'd tell me some of his experiences. And he was a miner, and he worked in the mines in Wales, but during the early 1900s, he went to America. And I was fascinated about the experiences that he would have had, because my cousin has shared me a scan of one of the postcards. He used to send a postcard to my great-grandmother every couple of weeks or so. And the one has a picture, and it's not even a photograph, it's a picture. And he says in his very formal note, "Wouldn't you love to ride in one of these new things called an automobile?" And that used to fascinate me, the things that he'd seen in his life. And as you know, when I was born, my grandmother was what was then called matron of what was then called an old people's home. And my second little item, I'm going to try to hold it, is this little thing here. It's a little bottle of Guinness, which has evaporated, because that was given when I was born by a man a resident at the home, and his name was Mr. Norton. And I remember him very well, even though my grandmother retired when I was about 10. But I remember him because he used to have a big lump on his head, which confused me as a child. But I realized that was actually probably, in all likelihood, a shrapnel wound from the war. Not the Second World War, but the First World War. And I just wanted to share those two things, because that's what I think history is so important. Yes. And people carry with them their stories. We all carry stories inside of us. And then to come to this particular month, as a gay man, I'm realizing, and I am only 54, but I have seen a huge change in the history of LGBT issues in the UK, not just on a personal level, but on a professional level. You've mentioned that I worked with Opening Doors. And it's really important that we acknowledge that history, because things are quite different today, but people still, even in this country, are exposed to violence. We've got the awful situation that is happening in Ukraine at the moment. And despite having a very progressive attitude around LGBT people years ago, it is now, almost illegal for people to be gay in Russia. So events like Black History Month, LGBT History Month, are really important for us to remember those who went before us and their struggles, to celebrate where we are, but also to acknowledge that we still have a very long way to go. Yeah. And as I say, for me, it's important on a personal level, because I just see, some of the things that have changed. When I used to go to that home. It's called the Court. It's still there. And every time I return to Cardiff, I look very odd actually, because I go outside and I sit and I contemplate, and I must look like some dodgy bloke watching the home. I'd love to go inside, because it's an old mansion house. It was great to go up because there were secret passages, there was a priest hole. In those days, men and women had two big dormitories that they slept in. Yeah. That was what it was like. And I remember very clearly a lady sat in the huge porchway, surrounded by bags, and I'd got to know her fairly well as a child, but of course you don't realize as a child all the life history you can find out about with people. And she was going, and I asked the staff, where's she going? And they said, oh, she's going to Whitchurch Hospital. And that didn't mean very much to me, but Whitchurch Hospital in Cardiff was the asylum, and she had dementia. So those, you know, those things have really influenced me and who I am today, but also the kind of history. My father tried to commit suicide when I was, I think, about 7 years old. And he apparently afterwards came out as being gay. I don't know if he was. We never talked about it. We didn't have a very good relationship from my teen years on, because he struggled with me being gay, came at me with a knife and all sorts of horrible things. But you know, he was put into a hospital, an asylum for a while, and I don't know what happened with him, but I've certainly met through opening doors men who had lobotomies or ECT, electric shock treatment, in the 60s and the 70s. So that could have happened.
It's not that long ago. It really is not that long ago.
You know, I think, well, I've seen this history, and yet 54 is not all that old, even though I do feel rather really old on some days. Yeah. It's about, you know, just recognizing, even in my time, you know, I was on the first London march against what was then called Clause 27. It became Section 28, which prevented the words were promotion of homosexuality in schools. In other words, it couldn't be talked about. You couldn't have gay plays. There was even question whether you could have the plays of Oscar Wilde presented because he was a gay author. There was so much confusion because it was a very strange piece of legislation. And I was in training as an actor in drama school at the time. And I went on this first demonstration, and then there were speeches from people cast of EastEnders. And well, we kind of been in this park in London, just by the Imperial War Museum. And I remember this being a sudden announcement: you need to all leave, and we recommend you lead in pairs. Do not leave alone, because the park is now surrounded by mounted police, and they're threatening to stampede us. I was petrified. I thought, what?
Of course. Yeah. That terrifying.
That was Britain in, I think that was 1986, I believe. So, yeah, we might think that things have changed, but and thankfully they have. But at 21, I was basically illegal because homosexuality was decriminalized in 1967, the year I was born. But it was only if you were over 21.
Yes.
So I was illegal. I remember being in the pub the week before my birthday, literally saying, right, I've got to count down 7 days and I'm legal. You know, my generation grew up with media that used headlines like perverts, pedophiles. That has a real impact on, you know, I know many people in my generation that grew up with very much internalized homophobia because that was everything that was around them. All you got to see as images was, you know, camp John Inman on television, not reflective of the majority of gay men. And I must say, I'm talking a lot from the perspective of a gay man, but you know, it was equally as bad for lesbian women, and I've met many lesbian women. One lesbian woman I met whose girlfriend was raped and murdered in front of her by a homophobic gang. awful things that have happened just because people are different.
Yeah. And in terms of kind of where we are now and thinking about, you know, the generation that you're talking about, you know, you're in your mid-50s, but and the people that perhaps are maybe in, you know, within your generation of 10 years that may be thinking about using care and support services. I mean, you know, why do care homes need to know about this history? You know, why is it important that that care homes are aware and that they recognise and that they celebrate this history? Why do you think, given the age that you know, your age group and our age group, I should say, Mike, and those slightly older than us, why is this important that we get this right, do you think?
Well, I think there's a couple of things really. Firstly, according to Age UK, there are an estimated 1 million lesbian, gay, bisexual and trans people aged 55 or over. So they haven't counted me yet, not until April when I turn 55.
Yeah.
So that's a big number.
Yeah, huge.
And that suggests that quite a big number of people living in care homes today are LGBT plus. I'm going to say that in that way because it's easier to use the initials. I don't like initials and acronyms, but there we go.
Yeah.
A percentage of that generation will have, as I said, they may have been at threat of lobotomies or ECG. They might have been in fear of their homes being raided by the police. My uncle, for example, who sadly no longer with us, but I was always sort of confused why he always had 2 single beds. His partner, Christopher, who he was with 50 years, had passed away. And I said, Ilse, one night we sat up and I was chatting and I said, Ilse, why you got 2 single beds? And he said, well, we always did that because if we were raided by the police, then they couldn't say that we were gay men.
A couple. Yeah.
Or a couple. Yeah. So even, and I found that quite fascinating and sad as well, that, you know, and he and Christopher were very out. Ilse was very big in politics in London. Christopher was Dame Maggie Smith's personal assistant, so a great couple. So, and they weren't shy about that, being open about their relationship, but you know, that kind of told me what it was like for that generation. Yeah. I used to have a lovely old friend in Cardiff when I was going through. I went to Cardiff to drama school, and there was a lovely chap called Ray, and I was always fascinated by talking to older gay people, and he had great shock of white hair, and he was such a character. And you know, those people have got so many stories. He told me what it was like in the war, and you know, he'd come up to London and he'd go to a place. There was a bar in London. I don't even know if it exists now. It was always called the Elephant's Graveyard. Mm. And what does that say in terms of ageist? Yeah. That it was a pub that was favoured by, near Piccadilly Circus, favoured by older gay men. Yeah. So those men's stories I've always found very interesting, because again, Ray and his partner of 50 odd years, they had single beds as well. There are women that have had their children removed from them. There are people that have lost their jobs, lost their homes, been arrested. You know, if we think about, you know, how that was a cloud hanging over people all of the time, and for trans individuals as well. You know, they were sometimes refused surgical support. Yes. For example, a man transitioning to be a woman might be refused some of the surgery, so might still be living with genitalia, male genitalia, and you know, so, and that's, I'm sure we'll talk about more about trans issues later. But for all of those reasons, many LGBT plus people, because of that fear of stigma and discrimination, will not necessarily be open about their sexuality in the care home. They may well return to the closet, as it were.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think what does that mean then in terms of staff, LGBT staff, and how they might, how they might communicate who they are to the people that they're supporting as well, because they, and I hope that they do want to listen and hear the stories as you did as a younger gay man. But, that an appreciation of that history is really important for all staff. But I'm thinking particularly, if LGBT History Month is about all LGBT people, isn't it? It's about everybody understanding the history and the opportunities there as well for connection, for people to be able to actually share of themselves and share of their history with perhaps somebody who might have a particular interest, because they want to understand the history of a movement, really, I suppose, that they are now benefiting from, that history and the rights that they now have as a result, which is quite interesting, I think, from a staff perspective.
Yeah, of course, and it's, I believe very strongly in allyship. I'm obviously not a Black man, but I can be an ally to Black people and support their experience and the fight for rights that they are still trying to achieve. So having allies who are maybe not lesbian and gay or bisexual or transgender, but having allies can be really helpful. As you said that just then, I was thinking about my husband is a senior manager at Great Ormond Street Hospital, the Children's Hospital, and they've brought in a brilliant scheme there where staff wear rainbow lanyards to show that they are not necessarily LGBT, but that they are allies and open to have conversations, because obviously at Great Ormond Street Hospital, they deal with children right the way through.
Of course, How important.
People do, and you see that I see that in so many places now.
And that visible, it's a physical visible sign, isn't it,
to say
of an ally.
I'm here to be open and hear your story. And I think there's great joy in hearing stories. I've sort of shared some of the negatives, but I think there's some great joy.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And I think in terms of the work that you've done with NAPLA, do you want to just say a little bit about some of the resources that we've developed for care homes particularly, and activity providers? We did some last year for Pride, didn't we? And you've done some recently for February. Do you want to say a little bit about that and just share where they're all available
on or in, I should say, the shed? And congratulations, NAPA, on that. I'm sure that took loads of work to create all that. And gosh, you can spend hours there looking around that shed. There's so much.
Spend hours in the shed, absolutely. It's quite funny. My husband's been disappearing to the shed for years. Now I'm disappearing to the shed. I've got the same excuse now, Mike. Brilliant.
So, in the shed, in terms of some of the things that I've written, after my last Tea Tuesday appearance, I wrote some stuff around thinking about, it's framed around a tool that I use on presentation skills training, actually, the 6 universal questions, the why. So there's a number of articles, but they're around the questions why, what, where, when, who, and how. And I think it's, it is quite a thing to do, and you don't have to do huge amounts of stuff, and you don't have to do everything today. But I think starting at the why you think it's important is probably the very first step. And then we've put some resources last year for Pride in terms of thinking about how to put together a Pride event. Natalie has written some great stuff that is there as well. So there's lots, and there are some activity ideas in the shed as well. There's an LGBT icons quiz. There's even a recipe for making an over-the-rainbow cake. That wasn't from me. I can't tell you who did that. But, you know, there's all sorts of little things that we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's so lovely about sharing ideas, you know, and we're all about sharing ideas. If there are people out there today that have got some ideas, please share them with us, because we're all about just getting ideas and resources to the people that need them for no or very, very low cost. So, you know, that's what we're all about, making sure you have what you need to be as inclusive in your activity practice as possible. We have got a couple of questions. If we could go to questions. I'm just going to make sure I don't miss any, and we've also got the ones from the helpline. Do you think it's important to do these activities if you don't have LGBT residents? That's from Joe. Thank you, Joe. That's a really good question.
Great question, Joe. And the short answer, yes. To explain what I mean by that, Joe, is, as I said earlier to Hills, many people will go back into the closet, as it were, when they go into care homes. So you don't necessarily know if you have LGBT plus residents unless you ask that question as part of, you know, people coming into the home, and you know the other people have experienced some of this history as well. So, you know, I was thinking about the LGBT icons, and, you know, you can do like a music quiz, because, you know, the Doris Day, did you know that Once I Had a Secret Love was loved by many, many, many people, but particularly people who are LGBT plus, because the song Once I Had a Secret Love that lived within the heart of me, and that resonated especially. But everybody will remember Doris Day. Judy Garland, everybody remembers her, but she was a great icon for LGBT community. Dusty Springfield, who was even my very own from Wales, Shirley Bassey, is an icon. But you can have a music quiz featuring those or other artists. The great thing is that we've got Google. I mean, my great-grandfather, I am sure, would be going pop, 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 pop with his pipe at the fact that we now have something called Google, where we can just search so much stuff.
Incredible.
And there's loads of things that you can find.
And I think one of the things I'm really reminded of the work that Natalie did at Belong before she came to NAPA. But I remember saying to me that actually one of the activities that she put on, one of her residents had come and said, I didn't think I'd find this very interesting, but actually it's really helped me, because I think it was his grandson was gay, and that he hadn't really chatted to him about it. He'd been been told, but he didn't really know how to talk to him about it. But just having been part of some pride celebrations or events, he kind of felt a little bit closer to him as a result, and was able to kind of reconnect with him. So it isn't necessarily all about the residents being gay, is it, or LGBT? It could be about their extended family and those relationships as well, which is really
exactly. I mean, a former boss of mine from years ago, who is an incredibly important lesbian activist in the UK. She was there at the very beginning. Her name is Lisa Power. I'm sure she won't mind me mentioning her name, because she's very out. But she's now, funny enough, life turns around. She's gone to Cardiff to live, and her mum is in a care home.
Right.
And, you know, she goes in there, as she said, I'm a stroppy lesbian, and I expect the home that my mother is in to be inclusive, because it isn't just about
the family's needs as well as the residents' needs. Absolutely. Oh, Joe's come back with another comment or question. Do you think that staff should be open and honest about their sexuality? That's interesting. I'm a gay man, and I constantly get asked about my wife. Obviously, I have a husband and not a wife, but I always go with what my residents say. I don't want to offend. I'm not hiding who I am. I'm just protecting the relationship I have with them, if that makes sense. That absolutely makes sense, Joe, and thank you for sharing that.
Makes sense. Yes,
any thoughts on that, Mike?
Nobody should be forced to divulge their sexuality. And I think one of the things that sometimes can happen in all sorts of different workplaces, actually, not just care homes, but I work a lot in the charity sector, and when somebody is out about their sexuality, then they seem to be the go-to person to, oh, you're the gay one, you can organize something for LGBT History Month, or you're the gay one, you can do something for Pride. I think it's very much a personal choice. And I think the one that, going back to the thing about the lanyard, just wearing a lanyard is a very important symbol. And it can just mean, I'm around to talk if you need to. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're LGBT plus, you're an ally.
That's a very good point. We've got comments just coming in, lovely. It's really lovely. Keep them coming. I'm in the same situation as Joe. I can understand these issues. Thank you for sharing that, Darren. Betty says, I love the idea of rainbow lanyards to show support and openness for conversations on sexuality, but don't use lanyards in my care home. Have you seen anything used like that in nursing homes? So in care homes as a symbol, that kind of visible symbol, I suppose, of inclusivity.
Certainly I've seen examples of rainbow flag stickers and that immediately tells me, going to a care home, oh, they are trying to be inclusive here. So yeah, those sorts of things can be really useful. And as I say, in any setting, I was doing some training, but it was dementia training, but in a university, funnily enough, in Wales again. They can't get rid of me. You can take the boy out of Wales, but you can't take Wales out of the boy. But I was doing some training anyway at a university there, and I was really struck how many young people at the university had rainbow lanyards. And I didn't say about their sexuality because it was very commonplace looking around.
Some of the other lovely examples coming in. Rainbow pin badges are used in our trust. Shoelaces, rainbow shoelaces as well. Yes, absolutely. Some lovely ideas. I do want to come to a couple of the questions that came in via the activity support service, Mike, if that's okay. One which is, I work in a religious home. We're not encouraged to promote LGBT activities. Should I challenge this? That's an interesting one. Challenge is an interesting word, isn't it, as well?
Simple answer, yes. But challenge is a word, as you say, that I think it's a lot more complicated. I think one of the things that everybody needs to be aware of, really, is that under the Equality Act, it makes discrimination based on what they call protected characteristics. There's 8 of them. That's illegal. Yeah. So it's illegal to discriminate on the grounds of the protected characteristics, and in there is sexuality, excuse me, sexuality, gender, and faith. So one of the things that is still quite difficult about that legislation in practice is, does one protected characteristic out-trump another? But what I would say on a very personal level, I do quite a bit of diversity and equality training, and I from a very personal view, as a gay man, I don't think I can expect other people to be accepting of me unless I'm accepting of others. And years ago, I was a woman who helped with give us advice with setting up the charity that I established, had a great phrase that's always stuck with me. And she said, let's respect what we have in difference and celebrate what we have in common. And there are always things that we can have in common. But to go back to this question, it's going to be about a balance. And whilst I respect the religious views of individuals, etc., they also have to respect the the fact that of anybody who may be LGBT plus, and they may not even know. I would guess probably not, because if it's a very religious setting, some people may not feel comfortable about being open. So I would say yes, challenge it, but do so respectfully. Get some support beforehand, whether that's from colleagues or whether that's getting in contact with organisations like Stonewall or Opening Doors London. And I've popped their email at their website addresses, but you can even Google, and organisations like that can give advice. But have allies. We need allies as LGBT plus people. This person need some allies, and try not to sort of take it on their own. And sometimes it's about, maybe there's a need for training, dare I say, as a trainer. Very often, it comes from, I was going to use the word ignorance, and I don't mean that word in a bad way, but not knowing, knowing.
And I suppose when you say, we're not encouraged to promote, again, it comes to that, back to that, what do we mean by promote? What does it mean? And can we challenge is just to challenge that might be just to have a chat about it. It doesn't have to necessarily be, full of conflict. It's having those initial conversations and being brave enough, isn't it, to ask why. So, well, why is that? Where does that come from? Is that a prehistoric, kind of a policy that was written by somebody a very long time ago?
Sorry, Hilary.
No, go on.
It's about that word promote, isn't it? And remember, that was the word that was in the legislation, and everybody went, what do you mean? Yeah. Promote a sexuality. Well, it's not a brand of washing powder for us to promote. Somebody's sexuality is an intrinsic part of them and themselves and their identity. And if many people on this will be familiar with Tom Kitwood's Flower and all the petals, and but identity is one of those psychological needs that Kitwood identified.
Absolutely, absolutely, huge, and it's part and parcel of quality care, isn't it? And activity provision is understanding the person and understanding ourselves as well, to be in order to be able to support other people.
I'll just say one last thing if I can, because sorry, but I was reading something, and it's a bit of jargon really, but it's called intersectionality. Try saying that in a pub after a couple of pints, isn't it? But just because somebody is a lesbian doesn't mean that she can't also be black, doesn't mean that she can't also be a mother or grandmother. So I always say on training, boxes and labels are for parcels, they're not for people. But we can have more than one, we can be more than one thing.
Absolutely, and at the same time, you're too right. There is another question, and this does pertain to the trans. When you said we will come back to trans issues, but I just want to mention this one in the last few minutes that we've got, Mike, if that's okay. So Tabby asks, I haven't got a clue about trans people or other terms used, and this came up in the chat as well. Natalie also mentioned this issue about language and understanding terms. How can I find out more? So this is obviously somebody who wants to be more aware, is worried about getting it wrong, about using the wrong kind of language or getting the language right. Any thoughts, any tips there?
Well, my first point would be I'm with you, because I get confused too. Terminology changes. For example, the word queer has been reclaimed by some in the community, but queer for my generation and older people was always a precursor to, homophobia. That was the word that was used before I got chased down a lane to find out I had no escape, and the people chasing me at baseball bats.
Exactly.
So terminology changes. Trans is the most inclusive term to use.
Yes.
And I say that because it's you know, there's a lot of medicalization with trans issues, and I was going to do a quiz with you today, but the time ran out. But I'm just looking down at my questions a minute, because the quiz was to look at pieces of paper now everywhere now, Hilary. The first trans person in the UK.
Right.
What year do you think?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot now, aren't you?
I know. Don't worry, it's nothing. It's not about getting it right or wrong. It's about learning.
Is it multiple choice?
Give me a decade.
Oh, blimey, 1800s.
Oh, okay. Not quite as far back as that.
Okay.
April Ashley, who was given an MBE, was the first trans woman. She was an actress, model, and author, and she was outed by the Sunday People in 1961.
Blimey.
Yeah.
Blimey. Yeah.
And the reason I asked that question is not about getting it right or wrong. It's just about, you know, we don't realize there's a lot of controversy around trans people and trans issues at the moment, and I don't want to get into the political side of that. But what I will say is, you know, trans people have been around for a very, very long time. I know that from even more personal experience, because there is a comedy singing group, 3 women, called Fascinating Aida, and one of them is trans. And Adele, which is the one that is trans, lives 7 doors along from me.
Oh, you lucky thing. They're brilliant, aren't they? They're brilliant.
They are brilliant. And, you know, we chat loads out the front, and, you know, she come and talks when it's summertime, because she's an avid gardener like us. But, you know, I would feel uncomfortable asking her the question, so to what level did she trans? Has she, I don't know, I definitely wouldn't ask her, does she still have male genitalia? But I would say, generally speaking, to go back to that question, the inclusive language is trans. That may well change over time, but that seems to be the consensus. There are organizations like Mermaids, and I've put them in the contact box, that can give advice. You know, I can't speak for trans people because I'm not a trans man or woman. But what I would say is, generally with any of these issues, don't be afraid to ask. And generally speaking, if from my experience, if somebody uses the wrong terminology, it doesn't necessarily bother me. And if it does, I will actually challenge them very gently and say, I don't want to be called queer, thank you. Because for me, the negative connotations of the word are too much. I've got loads of other gay friends that don't mind the word, but for me personally, so no one person is the same. If in doubt, ask and get support. And there are organizations that can help. And, you know, one of the things I was going to say earlier, you know, is check out the local organizations that you have. Maybe not in time for History Month this year, but for another event somewhere else, maybe Pride. See if you can involve them, get them to come in.
Brilliant. Make friends, make new friends, new relationships, definitely. And I think ask the questions is kind of what's sticking with me this afternoon, Mike. Thank you, because we don't all know the answers, and actually making assumptions, probably it's better to ask the question than make an assumption, isn't it? Exactly. And learn from that. We're all learning. Mike, I'm afraid.
Sorry, I just wanted to make one last point. Sorry, you know what I'm like. Always got too much to say. Just my final point really will be that LGBT plus History Month is just that, it's a month. and there are 365 days in the year.
Yeah.
And therefore, you know, this is a good opportunity to do something, but start small.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's better to do, I always say this with activity anyway, one-to-one.
Yeah.
One-to-one. Don't think about big quizzes and things like that where there may be issues and conflicts. Start small, one-to-one, or one or two or three with the people that you know.
Yeah. Brilliant advice. Thank you so much, Mike. It's been amazing. I could talk to you all day, as you know. Thank you very, very much for your time, your experience, and your, you know, your ability to share your experience so honestly as well. So thank you. Your personal experiences. Thank you very much for that, and as well as your professional experiences. If anybody wants to get in touch with Mike, we've put all of his contact details in the chat. We also, of course, have the NAPA support line. So if you want to contact us through that, we can get support from Mike as our advisor. Any questions that we can't help you with or can't answer. I do have a few NAPA announcements just before we wrap up. As you may know, NAPA is 25 this year. It's our 25th anniversary. And we've got lots of amazing plans and events to look forward to. So please follow us on social media, just to plug for our various social media platforms and our Eventbrite page, because all of our events, all of our training days, our webinars, teaching assistants, they're all there on our Eventbrite page, and we're updating it all the time. Our national campaign this year is creativity and creative approaches. So everything that we do in some way or other will link to being creative in one way or another. And our Arts in Care Homes programme, our Arts in Care Homes Day, is going international this year. So a date for your diary is the 24th of September. And please, you know, look out for all the various things we're going to have planned throughout the year leading up to the International Day of Arts in Care Homes, which we're very excited about. We're in the midst of planning our annual conference, which will all be around creativity. There is a call out for papers and presentations. If you'd like to share your practice with the NAPA membership and beyond, please get in touch. Please share your thoughts and ideas. A date for your diary is the 15th of June, and it will be a hybrid event this year. So we're continuing with an online platform, but we will also meet in person. So you have a choice of whether you want to be in person or online. Don't know how that's going to work on the day, but we've got everything crossed, hoping that it will all work. So another date for your diary. And just to let you know, in terms of our resource development and our practice development resources, we have various new resources out. So we've just published the celebrations resource that went out just before the end of last year. And we've also just issued this week the creative resources, creative quizzes resource, which is quite exciting and lovely. And we're about to launch a series of sketching and colouring pads to get people creative and thinking differently about art. So there's lots to come over the next few weeks. And I just want to thank everybody who's been involved with the consultation around the Jubilee. So we've had an incredible response to our consultation, asking care homes and activity providers what they need in order to celebrate the Jubilee. We know it's a huge date in the diary for care homes. So thank you to everybody for their incredible response. We're looking forward to launching the resource, which we've co-created with our members, a free webinar on the 22nd of March. I think we've got nearly 200 people signed up for that webinar already. So if you'd like to come to that, please pop onto Eventbrite, pop your details in, and we'll make sure that you can get a link to that webinar on the 22nd of March. And finally, and I will stop, finally, the NAPA magazine. The NAPA magazine has been a loved resource for many, many, many years, and has been a big part of NAPA's history. Talking about history, we celebrate our magazine, which is out next week, is a celebration of our 25 years, but it also marks the shift in a new approach to the magazine. So the magazine will cease to be a quarterly resource as from next week, and will become a daily offer that you will find in the shed. So it's quite a change in the way that we've done things. So it's a real celebration of the magazine, but also the 25-year anniversary. So please look out for the magazine. We're delighted with it, and we're really looking forward to sharing everybody's history. Mike's in there. He's got a piece in there about NAPA, about knowing about NAPA for years. So we've got lots and lots of articles in there for you to read. And do join me again for Tea Tuesday on the 22nd of March. That's the next Tea Tuesday for your diary. And I'll be chatting to Dr. Carrie Ryan about bingo. Is bingo a good or bad activity? And she is a PhD who has written a thesis on the benefits of bingo, which is controversial in activity provision, as you may know. So do join us on the 22nd of March, where we'll hear more about that. But for now, Mike, thank you as always, for joining us. Absolutely amazing. Thank you to everybody that's been here. Thank you to Gianna, who's been frantically adding thousands of links in the chat as we've been speaking. Thank you all very, very, very much. And we'll see you all again soon. Bye for now. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.